In this episode, we move deeper into cloud visibility by focusing on control plane logs, which record the administrative actions that shape your environment behind the scenes. If identity logs tell you who signed in and with what permissions, control plane logs tell you what those identities actually changed, created, deleted, or reconfigured. Many cloud incidents are not about attackers breaking encryption or exploiting complex software bugs. They are about someone changing a setting that weakens security. When a storage service is made public, when a firewall rule is opened broadly, or when logging is disabled, those actions occur in the control plane. Capturing control plane logs ensures that you have a record of these changes so you can understand how your environment evolved over time. Without this visibility, configuration changes can happen quietly and remain invisible until their impact becomes obvious. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. To understand the importance of control plane logging, it helps to distinguish between two types of activity in the cloud. The control plane manages configuration, while the data plane handles the actual use of resources, such as reading files or processing requests. When someone modifies access policies, deploys new infrastructure, or deletes a network rule, those actions occur in the control plane. Attackers often target this layer because changing configuration can be more efficient than attacking applications directly. For example, opening a network rule to allow unrestricted access might expose a service without ever touching its code. Control plane logs answer investigation questions like who changed this setting, when it was changed, and from where the action originated. Beginners sometimes focus heavily on application logs and overlook the fact that configuration changes can be just as critical. One of the most important categories within control plane logs is resource creation and deletion. Creating a new virtual machine, database, or storage bucket might seem routine, but these actions can signal unusual activity if they occur unexpectedly. Investigation questions might include whether a new resource was deployed in an unfamiliar region or whether a resource was deleted shortly after being created. Attackers sometimes create temporary resources for staging data or launching attacks, and then remove them to hide traces. Capturing resource lifecycle events helps reconstruct these patterns. Beginners should understand that every new resource expands your attack surface, and every deletion might remove evidence. Control plane logs provide the timeline necessary to analyze these lifecycle events. Another critical area involves configuration updates to existing resources. Changing encryption settings, modifying network rules, adjusting access policies, or disabling security features all fall into this category. Investigation questions often focus on whether a risky configuration existed from the beginning or was introduced recently. For example, if a database is found to be publicly accessible, control plane logs reveal whether it was always public or whether someone changed its access settings last week. These distinctions matter because they guide both remediation and accountability. Beginners sometimes assume that current configuration reflects original intent, but environments drift over time. Control plane logs allow you to see that drift clearly and determine its cause. Administrative identity management actions also appear in control plane logs, especially when they involve creating new users, modifying roles, or attaching policies. While identity logs capture authentication and privilege use, control plane logs capture structural changes to the identity system itself. Investigation questions might explore whether a new administrative account was created without approval or whether an existing account was granted elevated privileges. These events are particularly sensitive because they alter the balance of power in the environment. If logging reveals that a new high-privilege role was assigned shortly before suspicious activity, that sequence becomes highly relevant. Beginners should recognize that administrative actions are high-impact events and deserve careful visibility. Disabling or altering security controls is another area where control plane logs prove invaluable. Attackers who gain sufficient privileges may attempt to turn off logging, weaken encryption, or relax network restrictions to operate more freely. Investigation questions might include whether logging was disabled before data was accessed or whether monitoring rules were modified to reduce alerting. Without control plane logs, you may only notice the absence of logs rather than the deliberate action that caused it. Capturing these events ensures that attempts to blind your visibility are themselves recorded. Beginners should view control plane logging as a defense against silent degradation of security posture. Time sequencing plays a significant role in interpreting control plane logs effectively. A single configuration change might not appear suspicious on its own, but its timing relative to other events can reveal intent. For example, a privilege escalation followed by a firewall modification and then a data access event creates a narrative that is much more concerning than any one event in isolation. Investigation questions often revolve around sequence: what happened first, what followed, and how quickly actions occurred. Control plane logs provide the timestamps and context needed to build these timelines. Beginners should understand that logs are not just lists of events. They are chronological stories of behavior. Scope is another important concept when analyzing control plane logs. Cloud environments are often divided into accounts, subscriptions, or projects, and actions may be limited to specific scopes. Investigation questions might explore whether a risky change was confined to one project or applied globally across the organization. Understanding scope helps assess blast radius and prioritize response efforts. Control plane logs that include clear scope identifiers make this analysis more efficient. Beginners sometimes overlook scope details, focusing only on the action itself. However, knowing where a change occurred can be as important as knowing what changed. Centralization of control plane logs enhances their investigative value. If logs are scattered across multiple consoles or accounts, reconstructing events becomes time-consuming and error-prone. Centralized storage allows analysts to search and correlate events across the entire environment. Investigation questions often require seeing actions across multiple scopes, especially in multi-account setups. Without centralized logging, you risk missing connections between related events. Beginners should view centralization as a force multiplier for visibility, making it easier to spot patterns and anomalies. Centralized logs also simplify retention and protection, ensuring that evidence remains intact. Retention policies must align with realistic investigation timelines, particularly for control plane events. Some configuration changes may not reveal their impact immediately, and delayed detection is common in complex environments. Investigation questions may arise months after an event occurred, especially if subtle misconfigurations were exploited gradually. If control plane logs are retained for too short a period, critical evidence may disappear before analysis begins. Beginners should treat retention as a strategic decision rather than a storage optimization task. The goal is to ensure that meaningful historical data remains accessible when needed. Alerting based on control plane logs can provide early warning of high-risk changes, such as disabling encryption or opening network access widely. However, effective alerting depends on capturing the right events consistently. Investigation questions often begin with alerts, but rely on detailed logs for confirmation and context. Beginners should understand that alerts are indicators, not explanations. Control plane logs provide the explanatory detail necessary to determine whether an alert reflects a true incident or an authorized change. This relationship between logging and alerting reinforces the importance of comprehensive event capture. Drift detection also relies heavily on control plane logs, because they reveal when configurations diverge from established baselines. Investigation questions may focus on whether a change aligns with documented policy or represents unauthorized deviation. By reviewing control plane logs regularly, organizations can identify and correct drift before it becomes a serious vulnerability. Beginners should recognize that not all configuration changes are malicious. Some are simply unintentional deviations from standards. Control plane logging supports both security and operational quality by making these deviations visible. Capturing control plane logs that show configuration changes and risky administrative actions is essential for maintaining clarity and accountability in cloud environments. These logs provide a detailed record of how your environment was shaped, altered, and potentially weakened over time. By recording resource lifecycle events, configuration updates, identity management changes, and security control modifications, You build a narrative that supports effective investigation and response. For new learners, the central lesson is that configuration is power in the cloud, and power must be monitored carefully. Control plane logs transform invisible administrative actions into traceable evidence, enabling you to detect misuse, understand incidents, and maintain trust in your environment. When properly captured, protected, and analyzed, these logs become one of your most reliable tools for defending complex cloud systems.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.